The sudden lurch had been subtle at first, just a slight dip that spilled a few ounces of my lukewarm coffee onto the tray table. A ripple through the cabin, a collective sigh of annoyance from the other passengers on Flight 714 from JFK to LAX. Normal turbulence, I told myself, clutching the armrests. I hated flying. Every bump, every creak, every change in engine pitch sent a shiver of anxiety through my gut. But this felt different. Not violent, not a drop, but a sort of sickening wobble, like the plane itself was struggling, losing its graceful hold on the sky. Then came the scream. Not the polite, contained yelp of a startled child, but a raw, animalistic shriek that tore through the recycled cabin air. It erupted from the economy section, somewhere near the back. My head snapped up, my half-eaten bag of stale pretzels forgotten. I was in premium economy, row 12A, a window seat. Just enough legroom to feel like a treat, just enough distance from the horror that was about to unfold. The cabin lights flickered, a sudden, alarming stutter that plunged us into momentary darkness before snapping back on, brighter, harsher, revealing faces now etched with genuine fear. People were standing, craning their necks. A few shouts, panicked questions. What was that? Is everything all right? Another scream, closer this time, and then a guttural roar, deep and wet, followed by a sickening thud. The kind of sound that echoes in your bones, that speaks of bone against something too soft. A woman's voice, high-pitched and choked, screamed, "He's biting her! Oh my God, he's biting her!" My heart hammered against my ribs, a trapped bird desperate to escape. My breath caught in my throat, each inhale a shallow, useless gasp. This wasn't turbulence. This wasn't a mechanical failure. This was something else, something utterly, incomprehensibly wrong. A flight attendant, a young man named Kevin I'd seen earlier laughing with a passenger, came sprinting down the aisle from the back, his face ashen, eyes wide with terror. He stumbled, catching himself on seatbacks, his neat uniform askew. "Stay in your seats! Everyone stay in your seats!" he bellowed, his voice cracking with fear. But his words were drowned out by a fresh wave of panic. People were unbuckling, standing, trying to see, trying to flee. Through the narrow gap between seats, I saw a woman, mid-40s, elegant in a silk blouse, clutching her arm, her eyes wide with disbelief and pain. Blood, dark and glistening, bloomed on her pristine fabric. Behind her, a man I recognized from boarding, portly and red-faced, was slumped over a seat. His head was turned at an unnatural angle, and a dark, viscous fluid pulsed from a wound on his neck. His eyes were open but empty, and his jaw worked in a strange, uncoordinated rhythm, like a broken doll's. And then he appeared, the source of the terror. A man, maybe 30, in a crumpled business suit, pushed his way into the aisle, his movements jerky, uncoordinated, but disturbingly fast. His face was a mask of pale gray, veins standing out like black rivers beneath his skin. His eyes were milky, glazed over, utterly devoid of humanity. And his mouth was open wide, stretched unnaturally, revealing teeth slick with dark crimson. He stumbled, then lunged, not at Kevin, but at a woman frozen in fear just a few rows ahead of me. My mind refused to process it. Biting? Gray skin? Empty eyes? The images flickered through my brain like a broken projector. Movies, comic books, campfire stories, zombies. No, it couldn't be. Not here. Not now. I was on a plane, 30,000 feet in the air, nestled in a metal tube, utterly safe, utterly isolated. That was the whole point of flying, wasn't it? To escape the mundane horrors of the ground. The plane shuddered again, harder this time, a violent shake that sent luggage tumbling from overhead compartments. A cascade of carry-ons, backpacks, and duty-free bags rained down, slamming into heads and shoulders. The flight attendant, Kevin, screamed and darted into the galley, slamming the curtain shut behind him. His cry was a final, chilling note of despair. We were alone. The man in the business suit, the thing that had been a man, tore into the woman in the aisle with a terrifying efficiency. There was no struggle, no resistance, just a choked gurgle and the sickening sound of flesh tearing. The cabin filled with the awful metallic smell of fresh blood, thick and cloying, mixing with the stale air and the faint scent of jet fuel. It turned my stomach, rising bile in my throat. I pressed myself back against the window, trying to become invisible. My heart thundered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the rising cacophony of screams and guttural snarls. The window showed nothing but an endless canvas of blue sky and wispy white clouds. A serene, indifferent world outside, oblivious to the hell unfolding within this aluminum coffin. I was on a plane when the zombie apocalypse hit mid-flight. The words echoed in my head, a surreal, terrifying mantra. The row in front of me was empty, the passenger having apparently stood up earlier and now lost in the chaos. I saw my chance. If I could just... I fumbled with my seatbelt, fingers slick with cold sweat. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely unlatch it. Each click felt like an eternity. Finally, it gave way. I shoved myself out of the seat, knees wobbly, almost collapsing onto the aisle. The narrow corridor was a nightmare.
People were scrambling, trampling over each other, some trying to get to the front, others desperately pushing towards the back, as if either end offered salvation. But the infected were everywhere now, a growing tide of gray-faced monsters. I counted 3, then 5, then lost track as they lunged, bit, and roared, creating more of their kind in their wake. A woman in a bright yellow sweater who had been sitting 2 rows back now stood, swaying, her head lolling. Her eyes were milky, her jaw hanging slack. She was one of them. It had happened so fast. My eyes scanned for an escape, a weapon, anything. The flight attendant carts lay toppled, scattering many liquor bottles and snack bags. Overhead, the emergency exit signs glowed green, mocking me with their promise of an escape that was impossibly high and utterly useless. The air thrummed with the plane's straining engines, a deep, persistent hum that overlaid the screams and guttural growls. A man, his face a rictus of terror, stumbled backward into my row. He was clutching a small child, a boy no older than 5, to his chest. His eyes met mine, filled with a desperate, pleading fear. He tried to speak, but only a choked sob escaped. Behind him, a young woman, her face smeared with blood, lunged. Her movements were unnervingly swift. "Run!" I screamed, the word tearing my throat. I didn't wait. My body moved on instinct, pushing past the terrified father and child. I didn't know where I was going, but away from that was enough. I scrambled over an upturned seat, narrowly avoiding a grasping hand. My carry-on, a sturdy backpack filled with a laptop and some clothes, seemed miles away in the overhead bin. Useless. Everything was useless. My gaze locked on the cockpit door. Closed, impossibly thick. A beacon of safety, maybe, or perhaps a death trap. But it was forward, away from the escalating horror in the back. I pushed, stumbled, my ears ringing with the cacophony. The floor beneath my feet felt strangely soft in places, sticky in others. I didn't want to know what it was. A large, burly man who'd been arguing with a flight attendant about his luggage earlier now stood blocking the aisle, his back to me. He was shouting something, trying to fend off 2 infected passengers. His fists swung wildly, but they were too fast, too relentless. One of them, a gaunt woman, slammed into his back, and he staggered. The other, the man in the business suit, lunged for his neck, a sickening crunch. The big man went down, his thrashing quickly turning into a convulsion, then stillness. Then the same unnatural jerk as his body began to rise. I froze, trapped. The transformation was horrifyingly fast. His eyes, seconds ago filled with fight, now stared blankly ahead,
pupils dilated, a gray film clouding their depths. His jaw unhinged, letting out a wet gurgle. He was one of them. Just like that. The speed of it was terrifying. It wasn't a disease that took days or hours. It was instantaneous. My gaze fell on a small red fire extinguisher mounted on the wall near the galley. My only chance. I lunged for it, my fingers fumbling with the latch. The infected big man, still twitching, was turning, his new dead eyes locking onto me. His hand, thick and meaty, reached. My fingers finally found the release. I yanked the extinguisher free, its surprising weight a small comfort in my hand. He was less than 5 feet away. The smell of decay, faint at first, was growing stronger, mixing with the sickening scent of blood. It was an odor that would haunt my nightmares for the rest of my life. His mouth opened wide, that guttural gurgle echoing in the cramped space. I didn't hesitate. I swung the extinguisher, a desperate, clumsy arc, aiming for his head. The metal canister connected with a dull thud, not the satisfying crack I'd hoped for. He staggered, his head snapping back, but he didn't fall, didn't even seem to register the blow. His dead eyes just narrowed, his lunge becoming more determined. My heart leaped into my throat. He was still coming. He was fast. I squeezed the handle, releasing a cloud of white, choking foam directly into his face. It splattered across his gray skin, covering his eyes, his gaping mouth. He recoiled, momentarily disoriented, pawing at his face with twitching hands. This was my chance. I reversed my grip, holding the extinguisher like a club, and swung again, harder, with all the desperation of a cornered animal. This time, I aimed for the temple. Crack! A sickening, wet sound. His head snapped to the side, and he dropped like a stone, hitting the floor with a heavy thud. He didn't move. I stood there, panting, the extinguisher gripped in trembling hands, listening to the frantic beat of my own heart. The foam, stark white, covered the floor and his inert body. The silence, however brief, was deafening. Just the persistent drone of the engines and the distant muffled screams from the back of the plane. My victory was short-lived. The momentary lull in the general panic was over. More screams erupted from behind me, closer, more desperate. I turned, my eyes scanning the cabin. There were at least 8, maybe 10 of them now, moving through the aisles, drawn by the sound of struggle, drawn by the scent of fresh meat. They were a nightmare made real, shuffling, lurching, but terrifyingly effective in this confined space. My gaze darted to the cockpit door again. It was the only direction of relative safety. The only place untouched by the immediate horror. I sprinted, my legs feeling like jelly, past overturned food carts and scattered personal belongings. The fire extinguisher was heavy, cumbersome, but I clung to it like a lifeline. Each step felt like a gamble, a test of whether I would stumble and be overwhelmed. As I neared the cockpit, another flight attendant, an older woman with kind eyes named Sarah, burst out of the small forward galley, a frantic look on her face. Her uniform was torn at the shoulder, her usually impeccably tied scarf missing. She saw me, her eyes wide with a desperate plea. "The pilots, the cockpit," she gasped, pointing. "They're not answering. Something's wrong." Before she could say anything more, a sudden violent jolt rocked the plane. It was a sharp, stomach-dropping movement that sent us both sprawling. My head slammed against a seat armrest with a sickening crack. Stars exploded behind my eyes, and a wave of nausea washed over me. The fire extinguisher clattered from my grasp. My vision blurred, sounds became muffled. I could taste blood in my mouth, the metallic tang mixing with the residual fear. When my vision cleared, Sarah was gone. She must have been thrown further back. I pushed myself up, groaning, my head throbbing. The cockpit door was still ahead, slightly ajar now from the impact. A faint flickering red light pulsed from within. Danger. But perhaps also answers. I crawled, hands and knees, ignoring the sharp pain in my head, the metallic smell of jet fuel now stronger, a precursor to something worse. My hand brushed against the cold metal of the fire extinguisher. I gripped it again, using its weight to steady myself as I slowly pushed the cockpit door open. The scene inside was worse than anything I could have imagined. The cockpit was a mangled mess of wires, flashing lights, and control panels. One of the pilots, his head slumped over the controls, was covered in blood. The other, the co-pilot, was slumped against the side window, his face a ghastly shade of gray. His eyes were open, wide and milky, staring blankly at the swirling clouds outside. His mouth was moving in that same sickening, uncoordinated rhythm, a low, wet gurgle emanating from his throat. He was one of them, and he was still strapped into his seat. His body convulsed, a sudden violent jerk that made the seatbelt strain. His hands, still gripping the flight controls, clenched, his knuckles white against the metal. The plane lurched again, violently, dipping sideways, sending equipment crashing to the floor. An alarm blared, a piercing, insistent shriek that grated on my raw nerves. This was it. The nightmare was reaching its terrifying crescendo.
I was on a plane when the zombie apocalypse hit mid-flight, and now the pilots were gone. The plane was falling. My breath hitched. My mind, usually a whirlwind of anxious thoughts, went eerily blank. All that was left was a primal, gut-wrenching terror. The co-pilot, the infected thing, twitched, his head snapping towards me. The red light from the console cast grotesque shadows across his face, making his dead eyes seem to glow with an unnatural hunger. "No," I whispered, the sound lost beneath the blaring alarm and the groaning metal of the falling plane. My grip on the fire extinguisher was white-knuckled. He strained against his seatbelt, his mouth working, a low rasp and growl building in his throat. The plane dropped again, a stomach-lurching plunge that made me cry out. I grabbed onto the doorframe, my knuckles scraping against the rough metal. Looking out the window, through the co-pilot's milky eyes, I saw it. The ground, rushing up to meet us, and on the ground, a city, or what was left of one. Smoke plumed from several points, black tendrils reaching for the sky like grasping fingers. Fires raged, painting patches of the urban landscape in an angry apocalyptic orange. It wasn't just my plane, it was everywhere. The world was burning. The co-pilot lunged again, pulling against his restraints, his dead eyes fixed on me. The seatbelt held, but the fabric groaned, stretching taut. I had to kill him, now, before he broke free, before he joined his brethren in the cabin, before the plane hit the ground. With a desperate cry, I swung the fire extinguisher, aiming for his head. The confined space made it awkward, my swing limited, but the heavy canister connected with a sickening thwack against his temple. His head snapped back, a spray of blackish-red fluid exploding against the window. He slumped, then twitched, then went still, his empty gaze still fixed on the fiery landscape below. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the extinguisher. The plane continued its terrifying descent, the blaring alarm a constant assault on my ears. I scrambled into the cockpit, trying to make sense of the dizzying array of controls. Buttons, levers, screens displaying unreadable data. I was just a passenger. What could I do? What could anyone do? "Mayday! Mayday! Flight 714, we're going down!" I yelled into the headset that still hung from the first pilot's head, my voice cracking, hoping someone, anyone was out there. Nothing but static. The airwaves were dead. Or everyone else was too busy dying to listen. My eyes darted to the altimeter, plunging, fast. The plane was listing heavily to one side now, the wing dipping at an alarming angle. I pulled at the yoke, trying to mimic what I'd seen in movies, but it was stiff, unresponsive. The pilot's dead weight slumped against it, pinning it. I tried to push his body away, but he was heavy, unyielding. His arm, slick with blood, was tangled in the controls. Panic threatened to overwhelm me. My lungs burned, my throat was raw. I was going to die here,
high above the burning earth, trapped in a metal tomb. My family, my sister, my nephew, would they be safe? Would they even know what happened to me? The thought was a sharp, agonizing knife twist. Then I saw it. A red handle, clearly marked emergency landing gear. It was a slim hope, a desperate gamble, but it was something. I reached for it, fingers trembling, adrenaline coursing through me. If I could brace the landing. If there even was a runway left. The plane screamed, a metallic shriek that vibrated through the floorboards. The cabin lights flickered again, going out completely this time, plunging the cockpit into near darkness, illuminated only by the pulsing red alarms and the fiery glow from the burning city below. I yanked the handle. There was a grinding, protesting groan from somewhere beneath the plane. The plane shuddered violently, then righted itself slightly, the descent slowing, just a fraction. But it wasn't enough. We were still falling. And now the ground was even closer. So close I could see individual buildings, roads, the terrifying scope of the apocalypse that had swallowed the world while I was on a plane when the zombie apocalypse hit mid-flight. A sick, perverse irony. My hands flew across the console, pressing random buttons, pulling levers. Nothing. Just more alarms, more static. The plane was a dead bird, now just an oversized projectile. I braced myself, gripping the edge of the console, my eyes fixed on the rapidly approaching ground. I closed my eyes, picturing my sister's face, my nephew's laugh. Then came the impact. It wasn't a gentle kiss with a runway. It was a roar of tearing metal, a violent, deafening symphony of destruction. The plane slammed into something hard, something unyielding. The force of the deceleration was immense, slamming me forward against the controls. The seatbelt dug into my flesh, biting deep, but it held. Bits of plastic and metal exploded from the dashboard, shards flying past my face like shrapnel. I heard the rending, twisting shriek of metal, the sound of the plane disintegrating around me. Everything went black. A dull ache throbbed behind my eyes. The metallic tang of blood filled my mouth. I slowly opened my eyes, disoriented, confused. The world was upside down. Or I was. I hung precariously in my seatbelt, my head lolling. The cockpit was a twisted wreck, one side completely torn away. The pilot's body was gone, ripped from its seat by the impact, leaving only a dark, sticky stain. The co-pilot's head, where I'd struck it, was a mangled mess. He was still strapped in, but motionless, mercifully dead. A cold, biting wind whipped through the gaping hole where the window and half the console used to be. I could hear the distant crackle of fires, the faint, persistent wail of sirens, oddly muted. And then the moaning. That low, guttural sound, closer now, impossibly close. My body screamed in protest as I tried to move. Every muscle ached, every joint protested. I was alive, and the plane had crashed. I was on the ground, a twisted, crumpled wreckage of metal spewed across what looked like a devastated urban park. Trees were snapped in half, their branches scattered. A swing set, mangled, lay half buried in the earth. The air was thick with the acrid smell of burning jet fuel, ruptured lines, and something else. A sweet, sickly smell I was rapidly learning to associate with death. The wreckage was a maze of sharp, jagged edges. Sunlight, weak and hazy through the smoke-filled sky, filtered through the gaps, illuminating motes of dust and debris dancing in the ruined cabin. The other passengers, what had happened to them? The screams had stopped, replaced now by that incessant moaning. I unbuckled my seatbelt, my fingers stiff and clumsy. Gravity reasserted itself, and I slumped to the floor, groaning. Pain shot through my leg, a sharp, searing fire. I looked down. My left ankle was twisted at an unnatural angle, swollen and already bruising through my jeans. A sickening feeling washed over me. Broken, definitely broken. I tried to push myself up, but the pain was too intense. I collapsed back against the ruined seat, gasping. The fire extinguisher, my only weapon, was nowhere in sight, probably thrown clear during the impact. I was helpless, trapped, broken. A low groan emanated from somewhere close by. I froze, holding my breath, straining my ears. The sound was coming from the main cabin. The cabin where the infected had been, where they now probably roamed freely amidst the carnage. My heart thundered again, a frantic warning. I had to move. Broken ankle or not, staying here meant death. I couldn't be like the pilot or the co-pilot. I couldn't become one of them, not after surviving the fall. I pulled myself along the floor, using my good leg and my arms to drag my body forward, gritting my teeth against the searing pain in my ankle. Each inch was an agony, a testament to my desperate will to survive. The cockpit door, now little more than a bent frame, offered a glimpse into the main cabin. It was a graveyard. Bodies lay everywhere, twisted and broken, some clearly dead from the impact, others. I saw one, a woman in a floral dress, her face gray, her eyes milky.
Her body was twitching, her hands clawing at the air. She wasn't dead from the crash. She was one of them, and she was trying to get up. The cabin was surprisingly quiet, save for the distant moaning. It was as if the crash had stunned them, disoriented them. But they were beginning to stir. I could see other figures, some still strapped in, some partially buried under debris, beginning that slow, agonizing transformation. The terrible, unstoppable spread of the infection. I needed a weapon, something, anything. My eyes scanned the mangled cockpit. Wires, torn seats, shattered glass. Then I saw it. The flight yoke, ripped free from the controls, lay on the floor, a heavy, jagged piece of metal. Crude, but effective. I stretched, wincing, my fingers brushing against the cold, hard metal. I grasped it, the weight of familiar comfort. This was my new fire extinguisher. The woman in the floral dress groaned louder, pushing herself up from the wreckage. Her movements were jerky, uncoordinated, but purposeful. She turned her head slowly, her dead eyes scanning the wreckage, searching. She hadn't seen me yet. I had to get out, but how? The main cabin was a gauntlet, and through the massive rupture in the fuselage, I could see glimpses of the world outside. Not just parkland, but buildings, cars, and figures. So many figures, moving with that same slow, shuffling gait. The nightmare hadn't ended with the crash. It had just begun. I remembered the emergency exit, the one closest to my seat in premium economy, row 12A. If it hadn't been compromised in the crash, if I could get to it, maybe I could get out that way. It was a long crawl, a desperate hope through a field of reanimating corpses. The woman in floral dress was almost upright now. Her head snapped toward a faint groan from another part of the cabin. She shambled toward it, drawn by the sound of potential prey. This was my window. I dragged myself forward, away from the cockpit, toward the main cabin. Every movement sent a fresh wave of agony through my ankle, but I focused on the task, survival. One painful inch at a time. The floor of the plane was a treacherous landscape of shredded carpet, broken seat frames, and personal belongings. A child's teddy bear soaked in blood lay in my path. A briefcase spilling papers. A woman's high heel, impossibly elegant amidst the devastation. Each object a cruel reminder of the lives that had been extinguished, transformed, or utterly destroyed in the blink of an eye. I was on a plane when the zombie apocalypse hit mid-flight, and now I was crawling through its aftermath. I used the twisted metal of seat frames to pull myself along, my muscles screaming in protest. The air was thick with smoke and the metallic tang of blood, making each breath a struggle. Distant sirens, now closer, wailed intermittently, an eerie soundtrack to the unfolding horror. The woman in the floral dress was now feeding. A new groan, a low, wet tearing sound, confirmed my fears. I didn't look. I couldn't. Focus. Exit. Escape. My eyes scanned ahead. The emergency exit, just past row 10, was still intact. A small, tantalizing beacon of hope. But between me and it lay two more bodies, beginning to stir. One, a man in a pilot's uniform, not one of ours, probably a passenger on his way to another flight, was convulsing violently, his head thrashing against the floor. The other, a young girl, no older than 12, lay trapped beneath a twisted luggage compartment. Her eyes were open, wide with terror, but her skin was already turning that ghastly gray. She was crying, a soft, pitiful sound, but it quickly morphed into a wet gurgle. The infection was spreading through her, rapidly. My stomach lurched. I couldn't help her. She was already gone. I had to keep going. I dragged myself past the struggling pilot, his body twisting, his groans turning into snarls. He was almost free from the wreckage that held him. He thrashed, reaching for me with a dead hand. I pulled my leg away, the jagged metal of a broken seatbelt scraping my calf. I felt a sharp sting. Adrenaline masked the pain, but the fear was instant. Did he touch me? Was I infected? I didn't stop to check, not now. The emergency exit was agonizingly close, just a few more feet. My arms burned, my good leg was trembling. I could feel sweat plastering my hair to my forehead, dripping into my eyes. The young girl, the one trapped under the luggage, let out a heart-wrenching sob, then a gurgle, then nothing. Her body went limp for a second, then stiffened. Her eyes, still wide with terror, now glazed over, losing their humanity. Her jaw opened, letting out that familiar wet moan. She was one of them. The speed of it was terrifying. How could anyone escape something that moved so fast? I reached the emergency exit, my fingers scrabbling at the cold metal of the latch. It was stiff, unforgiving. My hands were slick with sweat and grime. I pulled, twisted, pushed. Nothing. The mechanism was jammed. The plane must have buckled, warping the frame. Despair threatened to swallow me whole. I was so close, so agonizingly close. I looked back. The pilot, or the thing that had been the pilot, was almost free. He was pulling himself from the wreckage, his clothes torn, his movements jerky. He saw me. His dead eyes locked on to mine. A low growl rumbled in his chest. I slammed my fist against the emergency exit door, a cry of frustration and despair tearing from my throat. It was useless. There was no way out this way. I was trapped. My eyes darted around the cabin. Was there any other way? The massive hole in the fuselage, further back where the tail section had presumably separated, was too far. The front entrance, near the cockpit, was blocked by the mass of feeding infected. I was in a cage. A broken cage, but a cage nonetheless. Then I saw it. A small service door, barely larger than a person, on the opposite side of the cabin, next to the galley. It was less conspicuous than the main emergency exits. Perhaps it had fared better in the crash. It was closer than the gaping hole at the back and far from the feeding frenzy at the front. It meant crossing the aisle, passing close to the reanimating girl, passing closer to the thrashing pilot. But it was a chance, my last chance. I took a deep breath, clutching the flight yoke like a club. The young girl, freed slightly by the shifting wreckage, was trying to crawl out, her moans growing louder. The pilot was now completely free, pushing himself up, swaying, his back to me. This was it. I pushed myself up, favoring my good leg, using the rows of seats as a crutch. My ankles screamed in protest, each step a jolt of white-hot agony. I limped, eyes darting, trying to be as silent as possible.
The pilot turned, his dead eyes sweeping the cabin. He hadn't seen me yet. The small galley door was just ahead. My heart pounded, a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I reached it, fingers fumbling for the latch. It was a simple mechanism, a single handle. I twisted. It turned. The door clicked open with a soft thud, revealing not sky, but another section of wreckage. A small, dark void. Behind me, a snarl. The pilot had seen me. He lunged, a terrifyingly swift blur of gray skin and tattered uniform. I swung the yoke in a desperate wild arc. It connected, not with his head, but his shoulder, sending him spinning, buying me precious seconds. I shoved myself through the small opening, wincing as the jagged edges of the metal frame scraped against my side. The space was dark, cramped, filled with the smell of hydraulic fluid and damp earth. I was inside the plane's underbelly, or what remained of it. I pulled the door shut behind me, the latch clicking with a satisfying thud. Silence. Relative silence. Only the distant moaning, the crackle of fire, and the frantic beat of my own heart. I leaned against the cold metal, panting, my injured leg throbbing, tears stinging my eyes. I was on a plane when the zombie apocalypse hit mid-flight, and now I was trapped beneath its carcass. The darkness was oppressive, broken only by slivers of light filtering through cracks in the fuselage. I fumbled for my phone in my pocket. Miraculously, it was still there. No signal, of course.
But the flashlight function worked. I clicked it on, a small, weak beam cutting through the gloom. The space was a crawl space, filled with luggage and cargo, all of it mangled and strewn about. Broken suitcases spilled their contents, clothes, toiletries, a child's toy. More reminders of the lives that had been disrupted, ended. The air was thick with dust and the metallic scent of blood. I crawled forward, my light beam sweeping the tight space. I needed to find a way out of here. This was just another, smaller cage. The fuselage creaked, groaned, settling further into the earth. It wouldn't hold forever. My light fell upon a familiar sight, my own backpack, miraculously intact, lying half buried under a pile of suitcases. A wave of relief washed over me so profound it almost made me cry. My laptop, my external hard drive, my notes, all probably useless now. But there was also a first aid kit I always carried, an emergency stash of protein bars, and a multi-tool. Small things, but in this new, brutal world, they were treasures. I dragged the backpack toward me, wincing as the movement sent fresh agony through my ankle. I unzipped it with trembling fingers, pulling out the first aid kit. It contained antiseptic wipes, bandages, painkillers. Basic, but vital. I cleaned the scrape on my calf. It wasn't deep, no bite marks, just a scratch. Another small victory. Then I focused on my ankle. It was swollen, throbbing, a deep purple spreading rapidly. I didn't have any splinting material, just bandages. I took 2 of the protein bars, broke them, and ate them slowly, chewing methodically, forcing myself to swallow past the knot of fear in my throat. The tasteless, dry food was a lifeline. As I ate, I listened. The moaning outside seemed to be moving away, fading slightly. Perhaps they were drawn to other sounds, other survivors, or perhaps the fires were consuming them. A distant roar, deeper than the moan, echoed through the wreckage. Something larger, more destructive. I needed to find a way out of this section. I scanned the walls of the crawl space with my flashlight. Riveted metal, unyielding. Then a faint glimmer, a gap. Barely a foot wide, but it opened to the outside. A crack in the fuselage, probably caused by the crash. It was small, but I was thin. If I could widen it, I might be able to squeeze through. I pulled out my multi-tool, fumbling with the pliers and flathead screwdriver. The metal was thick, tough. My hands were already aching, but desperation fueled me. I twisted, pulled, pried at the jagged edges of the aluminum.
Each scrape of metal against metal sent a jarring reverberation through the wreckage, making my teeth ache. I worked slowly, methodically, ignoring the pain, ignoring the fear. Minutes stretched into an eternity.
Sweat dripped into my eyes. My injured ankle pulsed with a relentless rhythm. The gap widened, slowly, agonizingly, inch by agonizing inch, until finally it was just wide enough for me to attempt to squeeze. I pushed my backpack through first, then turned my body sideways, exhaling all the air from my lungs. I winced as the sharp metal scraped against my ribs, against my hip. I pushed, gritted my teeth, ignoring the pain. My injured ankle caught on something, sending a fresh wave of agony through me. I cried out, a muffled sound. Then I was through. I lay on the damp grass, gasping, disoriented, the cool night air a shock against my overheated skin. The sun had set. The world was plunged into a bruised, apocalyptic twilight, lit by the flickering orange glow of distant fires. Black smoke still billowed into the sky, obscuring the stars. The plane, or what was left of it, loomed behind me, a crumpled, broken carcass, a tomb for the many who hadn't been as lucky. The stench of jet fuel and burning flesh was potent now, filling my nostrils, making me gag. And the moaning. It was closer now, a low, constant murmur from every direction. I pulled myself up, leaning heavily on my good leg, using the small, mangled trees for support. I was in a park, surrounded by the skeletal remains of playgrounds, benches, and picnic tables. Beyond the park, the city spread out, a terrifying panorama of destruction. Buildings, dark and silent, punctuated by the angry red and orange of uncontrolled fires. I was out. I had survived the plane crash. I had survived the initial nightmare on board. I was on a plane when the zombie apocalypse hit mid-flight. And now I was here, on the ground, alone, with a broken ankle, a small backpack, and a world that had gone utterly mad. My next step was critical. Where to go? The city was a death trap. Fires, smoke, the ever-present moaning. I needed to get away from the immediate vicinity of the crash site. The sound of the crash, the smoke, would draw them. I looked at the horizon. The fires seemed to be concentrated in the east and south. North or west, that was my best bet. Away from the immediate conflagration. Towards what? I didn't know. Just away. I started to limp, favoring my good leg, using my hands to steady myself against the broken trees. Each step was a fresh agony, a reminder of my vulnerability. I moved slowly, cautiously, my senses heightened, listening to every rustle of leaves, every distant groan. The shadows played tricks on my eyes, turning every discarded piece of debris into a potential threat. The park was eerily quiet, save for the crackling of distant fires and the constant, low hum of the infected. They were out there, everywhere. I could feel their presence, an oppressive, suffocating weight in the air. I spotted a path, winding through the park, leading towards what looked like a residential area. A suburb, perhaps. Houses, buildings, possible shelter, possible food, possible traps. But it was a direction. As I limped onto the path, a faint glint of metal caught my eye. Lying half buried in the grass, not far from the path, was a tire iron. It looked heavy, sturdy, a far better weapon than the flight yoke I'd abandoned. I limped towards it, heart pounding. My hands closed around the cold, textured metal. The weight was reassuring. This felt real. This felt like a chance. I gripped the tire iron, its cold metal a small comfort against my clammy skin. My ankle throbbed, a relentless drumbeat of pain, but the fear of what lurked in the shadows pushed me onward. The park path, once a serene route for dog walkers and joggers, was now overgrown, littered with debris. A child's bicycle, bent and broken, lay discarded in the bushes. A pair of running shoes, stained with something dark. Every step was a careful calculation, every shadow a potential threat. The moaning was a constant companion now, a low, mournful chorus that seemed to rise and fall with the wind.
It was disorienting, impossible to tell how many there were or how close. My senses were on overdrive, my ears straining for any distinct sound, any shuffle, any growl. The residential street ahead was dark, silent. Houses loomed like empty husks, their windows black, their lawns overgrown. No lights, no signs of life, just an oppressive, terrifying stillness. I had hoped to find other survivors, a friendly face, a beacon of hope. But all I found was emptiness, and the pervasive, chilling silence of a world that had died. I limped onto the pavement, the rough concrete scraping against the sole of my shoe. The asphalt was cracked, littered with abandoned cars, their doors ajar, their windows shattered. Some still had their headlights on, burning out, casting eerie, fading circles of light on the road. A child's car seat, empty, lay in the back of one sedan. The sight was a fresh stab of grief, a reminder of the countless lives extinguished in this brutal, instantaneous apocalypse. My gaze fell on a two-story house, its front door slightly ajar, a porch light flickering erratically. A beacon or a trap? Every instinct screamed caution, but the thought of shelter, of finding a moment of reprieve, was a powerful draw. I decided to check it out. I needed water, maybe food, a safe place to rest my throbbing ankle. I approached slowly, each step a testament to my dwindling endurance. The tire iron was held tight, ready. The porch light flickered, illuminating a scattering of mail on the steps, a forgotten child's toy. Mundane relics of a life that was now utterly, incomprehensibly gone.
I was on a plane when the zombie apocalypse hit mid-flight, and now I was picking through the bones of what was left. The front door was partially open, revealing a dark, silent interior. The air was stale, thick with the scent of dust and something vaguely organic, something unsettling. I pushed the door open further with the tip of my tire iron, wincing as the wood groaned on its hinges. "Hello?" I whispered, my voice hoarse, barely audible. No response, just the silence, the oppressive, terrifying silence. I stepped inside, my flashlight beam cutting a shaky path through the darkness. The living room was a mess, furniture overturned, lamps shattered, cushions torn. It looked like a struggle had taken place, a violent, desperate struggle. A woman's handbag lay open on the floor, its contents spilled across the carpet, a lipstick, a wallet, a photograph of a smiling family. A low, dragging sound from upstairs. My heart leaped into my throat. Not empty, not safe. My breath caught in my chest. I froze, listening. The sound came again, a slow, deliberate scrape, then a soft thud. It was moving. I gripped the tire iron tighter, my knuckles white. Should I run, get out now? But the thought of going back out into the open with my injured ankle was equally terrifying. I was in a house, a building, walls, a temporary barrier. My eyes swept the room, searching for a place to hide, a weapon, anything. The kitchen was to my left, the stairs directly ahead. The dragging sound came again, closer this time. It was coming down the stairs. I backed into the kitchen, my flashlight beam sweeping desperately. Knives, a block of knives on the counter. My hand darted out, grabbing the largest one, a butcher knife with a heavy, sharp blade. Now I had two weapons, two chances. The creak of a stair, a low moan, unmistakable. It was almost at the bottom. I pressed myself against the counter, hidden behind a kitchen island, my weapons raised, my heart hammering like a war drum. A shadow fell across the kitchen entrance. Then a figure. A man, his body twisted, his head slumped, one arm dragging uselessly. His skin was gray, his eyes milky, his jaw hanging open, letting out that wet, rasping moan. He was wearing pajamas, blood-stained and torn. His bare feet scraped against the floor, a sound that made my skin crawl. He was shuffling, slowly, methodically. He turned his head, his dead eyes sweeping the room, searching for prey. He didn't see me, not yet. He shuffled past the kitchen entrance, moving toward the living room, drawn by the faint sounds of the outside world, or perhaps just moving aimlessly.
This was my chance. I had to get upstairs. To what, I didn't know. But the ground floor was compromised, and the street was worse.
I moved silently, my injured ankle protesting with every agonizing step, but I forced it. Step, breathe, step. I reached the bottom of the stairs, my hand gripping the banister. The wood felt rough, reassuringly solid. I started to ascend, slowly, carefully, each step a silent prayer. The stairs creaked under my weight, each groan a spike of pure terror. I froze, listening. The moaning man in the living room didn't react. He was still shuffling, unaware. I reached the top of the stairs. The landing was dark, a hallway stretching into deeper shadow. 3 doors. A bathroom, a bedroom, and another closed door at the end. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, dancing across faded wallpaper, a dusty family portrait. The bedroom door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open slowly, cautiously. The room was neat, undisturbed. A queen-sized bed, a dresser, a nightstand. A window overlooking the backyard. This felt safe. Temporary, but safe. I limped into the room, pulling the door shut behind me, fumbling for a lock. There was a simple bolt lock. I slid into place with a soft click. The sound echoed in the sudden, blessed silence. I leaned against the door, exhaling a shuddering breath, the weapons clattering from my hands. My body sagged, my adrenaline high slowly giving way to exhaustion. I was in a safe house. For now. I scanned the room, my flashlight beam sweeping every corner. No windows broken, no signs of forced entry. Just the lingering scent of old dust and something faintly floral. I moved to the window, pulling back the heavy curtains. The backyard was dark, overgrown, a tangled mess of shrubs and weeds. Beyond it, a tall wooden fence, and then the dark shapes of other houses. The moon, a thin sliver, peered through the smoke, casting long, eerie shadows. The moaning was softer here, muffled by the walls, but still present. A constant, chilling reminder of the world outside. I looked at my ankle, swollen to twice its normal size, a kaleidoscope of purples and blacks. I needed to immobilize it. I needed rest, and I needed to make a plan. I hobbled to the bed, pulling off a pillowcase. I ripped a strip of fabric from an old sheet I found in the closet, fashioning a makeshift splint with the pillowcase and some of the protein bar wrappers. It wasn't professional, but it offered some support, some relief from the throbbing agony. I swallowed 2 of the painkillers from my backpack, hoping they would dull the edge. I sat on the bed, leaning against the headboard, the tire iron and knife close at hand. My backpack, a small island of comfort, lay beside me. My phone, still no signal, was now just a flashlight. I looked at the dark screen, a reflection of my own exhausted, grime-streaked face. My mind reeled, trying to process it all. Hours ago, I was just a passenger on a plane, annoyed by a delayed flight, dreaming of a sunny California vacation. Now, I was on a plane when the zombie apocalypse hit mid-flight, and I was a survivor, broken and alone, trapped in a stranger's house in a dead city. The sheer, unfathomable scale of it was overwhelming. The world had ended, not with a bang, but with a series of frantic screams in a cramped airplane cabin. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the images, the gray faces, the milky eyes, the tearing flesh. But they were burned into my retinas. The smell of blood, the metallic tang, was still in my nostrils. The screams, the moans, still echoed in my ears. This was my new reality. There was no going back. I had to survive. For my sister, for my nephew, for the memory of a world that was lost. I had to find them, or at least, I had to try. The painkillers slowly began to work, dulling the sharp edges of the pain in my ankle, easing the tension in my muscles. Exhaustion pulled at me, a heavy, irresistible weight. I knew it was dangerous to sleep, but I couldn't fight it.
My eyes drifted closed, my last thought a desperate prayer for dawn. I woke with a gasp, my body rigid, my heart pounding. The room was still dark, but a faint gray light was beginning to filter through the curtains. Dawn. I must have slept for hours. My ankle still throbbed, a dull ache now, but the painkillers had helped. My throat was dry, my mouth tasted like dust and fear. I pushed myself up, wincing, leaning on the nightstand for support. The silence was still present, but now a new sound filtered through the walls, the distant, intermittent crackle of gunfire, and the moaning. It was louder again, closer, more insistent. I needed water, and I needed to move. This house was a temporary haven, but it wouldn't last. The moaning downstairs, the infected man in the living room, was a constant reminder. I grabbed the tire iron and the butcher knife, my only companions in this new world. I limped toward the bedroom door, my senses on high alert. I pressed my ear against the wood, listening intently. Nothing, just the faint hum of the world dying outside. I unbolted the door, slowly, cautiously, my heart hammering against my ribs. I peered out into the hallway, still dark, still silent. I crept down the stairs, each step a deliberate, agonizing effort. The living room was empty. The moaning man was gone. My stomach lurched. Where had he gone? Had he left the house? Or was he somewhere else, waiting? I moved into the kitchen, my flashlight beam sweeping the counters, the cabinets. I found a half-empty bottle of water on the counter. I drank it in gulps, the cool liquid a balm to my parched throat. It was the most delicious thing I'd ever tasted. Food.
I opened the refrigerator. The power was out. Everything was warm, spoiling. A faint, unpleasant smell emanated from inside. I slammed it shut. The pantry, canned goods. I found a can of peaches, another of beans, and a small bag of stale crackers. Not much, but enough for a few days if I rationed carefully. I stuffed them into my backpack. I needed a better way to get around. Crutches, a cane, anything to alleviate the pressure on my ankle. I scanned the kitchen again. No. I limped into the living room, my eyes searching. An umbrella stand? A coat rack? No. Then I saw it. A heavy, old-fashioned walking stick, left leaning against the fireplace. Perfect. I grabbed it, testing its weight. It was sturdy, made of dark, polished wood with a heavy brass handle. It would serve as both a crutch and another weapon. I replaced the tire iron with the walking stick, keeping the butcher knife in my other hand. The tire iron was too heavy, too cumbersome for my injured state. The walking stick was lighter, more versatile. I needed to get out of this house. Staying here was an invitation for trouble. The house had already been compromised. The moaning man might return, or others might be drawn to the lingering scent of life. I limped towards the back door, located off the kitchen. It was locked, but the glass pane was shattered, a clear sign of forced entry. I pushed it open, revealing the overgrown backyard. The fence was high, but climbable, especially with the walking stick. I stepped out into the crisp morning air, now tinged with the familiar smells of smoke and decay. The sun was higher, filtering through the haze, painting the sky a sickly yellow. The world was utterly, brutally real. I was on a plane when the zombie apocalypse hit mid-flight, and now I was walking through its ashes. I pushed my backpack over the fence, then, with a grunt of pain, I hoisted myself up, using the walking stick to balance, my good leg finding purchase on the wooden slats. My injured ankle screamed in protest, but I forced it. Inch by agonizing inch, I pulled myself over, dropping to the other side with a soft thud. I was in another backyard, identical to the last. More overgrown grass, more looming fences. But it was a new path, a new direction. I started to limp forward, moving away from the crashed plane, away from the immediate chaos. My goal was simple:
Get away from the city, find the countryside, find somewhere safe, somewhere with fewer people, fewer targets, fewer of them. My ankle was throbbing, a relentless pulse of pain, but the painkillers from my emergency kit were working, taking the edge off. I moved slowly, cautiously, using the walking stick to support myself.
The suburban streets were eerily quiet, the houses silent and vacant, their windows dark like empty eyes. The only sounds were the distant crackle of fires, the occasional blare of fire's alarm, and that ever-present, low moaning. I kept to the sidewalks, weaving around abandoned cars, bicycles, and discarded toys. Each item was a stark reminder of the lives that had been abruptly, brutally interrupted. A child's backpack, colorful and bright, lay half open on the curb, spilling books and crayons onto the pavement. A pair of sunglasses, dropped in a hurry. A grocery bag, torn open, oranges scattered on the ground. The banality of it all was unsettling, a cruel contrast to the horror that had descended. As I limped past a row of identical houses, a sudden movement caught my eye. A flicker in a darkened window. I froze, pressing myself against the overgrown hedge, my heart leaping into my throat. My grip tightened on the walking stick, my fingers brushing against the cold, sharp blade of the butcher knife. I held my breath, straining my ears. Nothing, just the wind rustling through the leaves and the distant moan. My mind raced. Was it a survivor or one of them? Every interaction was a gamble, a life-or-death decision. I decided caution was paramount. I stayed hidden, watching the window, waiting. Minutes stretched into an eternity. No further movement. The house remained silent, dark. I moved on, my senses on high alert, my paranoia growing with every step. The sun was rising higher now, casting long shadows, making the empty streets feel even more desolate. The smoke in the sky was thicker, turning the morning light into a sickly yellow haze. I needed to find a main road, a highway, something that would take me out of this urban nightmare. I remembered the layout of the city from the plane's flight path, before everything went to hell. The airport was on the outskirts, near a major interstate. If I could get to that interstate, I might be able to find a car, a ride out. The thought of finding a working car was a potent motivator. It meant speed, distance, a chance to outrun the shuffling hordes. It meant a path to freedom, a path away from the death that choked this city. I continued my slow, painful trek, focusing on the simple, visceral goal: survive. One step at a time, one street at a time. The pain in my ankle was a constant companion, a dull, aching throb that never truly went away. But I pushed through it. The survival instinct was a powerful drug, overriding everything else. As I turned a corner, a terrible sight greeted me. A school bus, overturned, its yellow shell mangled and smoking. Bodies lay scattered around it, too many to count. Some still, some twitching, some already standing, shuffling aimlessly. My stomach lurched. Children. Teachers. Their lives ended, transformed. The sheer scale of the horror was unfathomable. I was on a plane when the zombie apocalypse hit mid-flight, but the ground was 1,000 times worse. I hugged the opposite side of the street, pressing myself against the hedges, trying to make myself invisible. The moaning from the bus wreckage was thick, a guttural symphony of the damned. I could smell the decay, the blood, the burning plastic of the bus. It made me gag. I moved past the scene of carnage, my eyes fixed forward, my breath held tight in my chest. I didn't want to see, didn't want to hear, but the images were burned into my mind. The small shoes, the bright colors of their backpacks, the innocence ravaged. Beyond the bus, the street opened up, wider, leading towards what looked like a commercial district. Shops, restaurants, a gas station, and, in the distance, a massive highway overpass. Hope flickered, small but insistent. The interstate, my ticket out. The commercial street was a wreck.
Storefronts shattered, merchandise strewn across the pavement. Cars lay abandoned, some piled up in grotesque collisions. But there were fewer infected here, perhaps drawn away by the fires or by the sounds of other struggles. The silence, broken only by the wind and the distant moaning, was unnerving. I limped towards the gas station, my eyes scanning for any movement, any sign of life. A working vehicle was a long shot, but worth checking. Fuel, a crucial resource in this new world. The gas station itself was mostly intact. The convenience store, however, was a mess. Its glass door was shattered, a gaping maw revealing a ransacked interior. Shelves overturned, products scattered. But it was also a source of supplies, food, water, medicine. Dangerous, but necessary. I took a deep breath, pushing past the broken door. The smell inside was a mix of stale coffee, old cigarettes, and something metallic. My flashlight beam cut through the gloom, dancing across the ruined shelves. Cans of soda, bags of chips, candy bars, all spilled, trampled. I moved cautiously, my walking stick tapping lightly against the debris. My eyes scanned every shadow, every corner. I heard a faint scratching sound from the back room. My heart leaped. I froze, listening. It came again, a persistent scrape, scrape, scrape. A survivor or one of them? I gripped the butcher knife, my knuckles white. My hand trembled, but I forced myself to move forward, towards the sound. Each step was deliberate, silent. I reached the back room, a small storage area. The scratching was louder now, frantic. I pushed the door open, ready to strike. A cat, a mangy, emaciated tabby cat, trapped behind a fallen shelf, was desperately trying to claw its way free.
It looked up at me, its eyes wide with fear, its fur matted and dirty. It let out a weak meow. A wave of relief, so profound it almost buckled my knees, washed over me. A living thing, not a monster, not a threat, just a terrified, starving animal. I knelt, ignoring the fresh spike of pain in my ankle, and carefully moved the fallen shelf. The cat darted out, a blur of gray fur, then stopped, looking back at me with cautious curiosity. I reached into my backpack, pulling out a protein bar. I broke off a piece and offered it. The cat sniffed it, then ravenously began to eat, its small, rough tongue lapping at the sweet, dense protein. A moment of quiet, a moment of connection in a world that had become utterly hostile. I watched the cat eat, a strange sense of calm settling over me. Small mercies, small victories, these were the things that would keep me going. I finished searching the convenience store, finding a few untouched bags of chips, a sealed pack of instant coffee, and, most importantly, a half-dozen bottles of water hidden under the counter. I also found a roll of duct tape and a small rusted hammer, which I added to my growing arsenal. Duct tape, the ultimate survival tool. The hammer, another bludgeon. As I gathered my supplies, I heard it, a guttural growl close by, followed by a series of wet thuds. My head snapped up. It was coming from outside. I looked through the shattered convenience store door. 3 of them, shuffling around a parked car, drawn by the sound of my movement, or perhaps just moving aimlessly until they caught a scent. Their clothes were tattered, their skin gray, their movement stiff and jerky. They were moving towards the door, towards me. My heart hammered against my ribs. I was trapped, again. This was the pattern, wasn't it? Brief respite, then fresh terror. The cat, sensing the danger, darted into a dark corner, disappearing from sight. I had to move. I looked around the back room. A small, dirty window, high up, barely large enough for me to squeeze through. But it led to an alley, an escape route. I grabbed a metal stool, dragging it over to the window. My ankle screamed in protest, but I forced it, climbing onto the stool, my head almost touching the ceiling. I pushed at the window, testing its resistance. It was old, grimy, but unlocked. I forced it open, the hinges groaning loudly. The sounds of the infected were closer now, their growls, their wet shuffles. They were at the front door. I could hear them pushing through the shattered glass, their bodies scraping against the frame.
I hauled myself through the window, grucking with effort, my injured ankle sending sharp pangs of agony through my body. I tumbled out into the narrow, refuse-strewn alley, landing hard on my side.
The duct tape, still in my hand, flew from my grasp. I scrambled up, ignoring the fresh pains, and looked back. Their gray faces were already appearing at the window, jaws snapping, dead eyes fixed on me. They were slow, but relentless. I limped down the alley, the walking stick tapping against the uneven pavement, my backpack bouncing against my back. The alley was a dead end. Walls on both sides, a locked gate at the far end. Damn it. I looked around desperately. A dumpster overflowing with trash, its lid askew. And a fire escape leading up the side of the building next door. A chance, a desperate, agonizing chance. The infected were spilling out of the gas station window now, some struggling to squeeze through, their movements awkward, but their intent clear. They were coming for me. I threw my backpack onto the top of the dumpster, then, with a grunt of pain, pulled myself up, my good leg finding purchase on the slick, greasy metal. My injured ankle screamed in protest, but I forced it, hoisting myself up. My fingers scrabbled at the bottom rung of the fire escape ladder. It was rusted, corroded, but it held. I climbed, each rung a test of my rapidly dwindling strength. My arms burned, my good leg ached, and my ankle throbbed with a relentless rhythm. The infected were clambering onto the dumpster now, their grunts and growls growing louder. One of them, a woman in a tattered blue uniform, reached for my foot, her fingers brushing against my shoe. I kicked back, my foot connecting with her face, sending her staggering. I pulled myself onto the first landing of the fire escape, collapsing against a railing, panting. Below me, the alley was filling with them. A dozen, maybe more. All shuffling, all groaning, all staring up at me with those dead, milky eyes. I had made it, for now, but I was still trapped, high above the alley, with nowhere to go but up, and a horde of the undead blocking my only way down. I was on a plane when the zombie apocalypse hit mid-flight, and now I was stuck on a fire escape, feeling just as isolated and desperate. The sky above was a hazy yellow, the sun a pale, sickly disk obscured by smoke. The world was utterly, irrevocably broken, and I was just trying to survive another minute. I pulled my backpack onto the landing, retrieved the duct tape, and began to secure the lower section of the fire escape ladder, wrapping the tape tightly around the mechanism that allowed it to drop. It wouldn't hold forever, but it would buy me time. Every second counted. Every small barrier meant another chance. My eyes scanned the rooftops, a maze of rusted vents, satellite dishes, and dark, silent windows. And, in the distance, still the faint, almost mocking outline of the interstate, my escape route. If I could just get there. I started to climb again, higher this time, towards the roof. The metal was hot beneath my hands, heated by the rising sun. My muscles screamed, but I forced them. Up, always up, away from them. I reached the roof, pulling myself over the parapet with a grunt of pain. The vast, flat expanse of asphalt was littered with debris, but it offered a temporary reprieve, a moment of relative safety. I collapsed against the low wall, my body shaken with exhaustion, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The silence here was different. Not the oppressive silence of the empty houses, but a vast, desolate quiet, broken only by the distant sounds of the city dying. The moaning was a faint hum now, almost peaceful in its distance. Almost. I looked back down at the alley. The infected were still there, milling about, their dead eyes fixed on the fire escape, on the roof. They knew I was here. They just couldn't reach me. Not yet. I pulled out my map, a crumpled gas station map I'd found in my backpack. I spread it out on the dusty asphalt, tracing my finger across the routes. The interstate, it was maybe 2 miles away, a vast distance on a broken ankle, through a dead city. But it was a goal, a destination. My gaze fell on the roof of the building across the alley. It was lower,
connected by a flimsy, rusted advertising billboard. A risky jump, but a possible path forward. I could traverse the rooftops, moving from building to building, avoiding the streets, avoiding the hordes. This was my plan. A desperate, dangerous plan, but it was all I had. I was on a plane when the zombie apocalypse hit mid-flight, and now I was a ghost on the rooftops, desperately searching for a way out. The sun beat down, turning the asphalt into an oven. The air was thick with smoke and the pervasive stench of death. But I was alive, and as long as I was alive, I would fight. I stood, testing my weight on my injured ankle. The makeshift splint held, offering some support. The painkillers had dulled the pain to a manageable throb. I grabbed my walking stick, my butcher knife, and took a deep breath. One step at a time, one rooftop at a time. The world had ended, but my fight for survival had just begun. I walked the length of the roof, my eyes scanning the surrounding buildings. The city was a sprawling corpse, concrete and steel eaten away by a new, relentless plague. Smoke continued to rise from multiple points, a constant reminder of the fires raging below. The moaning, a low, guttural hum, was a perpetual backdrop, a chilling lullaby for the dying world. I reached the edge of the first rooftop, staring across the narrow alley at the building opposite. The billboard was flimsy, old, its weathered paint peeling.
It sagged slightly in the middle, a precarious bridge over a zombie-infested chasm. The gap was maybe 10 feet, too far to jump on a good leg, let alone a broken one. But the billboard, it offered a chance. I took a deep breath, my heart hammering against my ribs. This was a gamble. A fall meant certain death, or worse. But staying put meant eventual starvation or being overrun when they inevitably found a way to reach the roof. This was the only way forward. I took a running start, as much as my injured ankle would allow, and launched myself forward, my good leg pushing off the edge. For a terrifying second, I was airborne, the alley and the moaning horde within it a blur beneath me. My hands stretched out, grasping, praying. My fingers slammed into the metal frame of the billboard, the impact jarring my teeth. My body swung violently, legs dangling over the abyss. The metal groaned under my weight. I scrambled, pulling myself up, my muscles screaming in protest. My good leg found purchase on the crossbeam, then my injured one. I lay there, draped across the advertisement, panting, the smell of rust and decaying paint filling my nostrils. I was across. Another small victory, another step away from the immediate threat. I pushed myself onto the next rooftop, collapsing onto the rough tar paper, my body trembling with exhaustion and adrenaline. This rooftop was wider, leading into a maze of heating units and ventilation shafts. I navigated through them, my senses on high alert, always watching, always listening. The sun was higher now, casting harsh, unforgiving light on the desolate landscape. The heat was oppressive, radiating off the dark surfaces. I found a water tower, gleaming dully in the sunlight, its base surrounded by a chain-link fence. Not easily accessible, but the thought of clean water, real water, was a powerful motivator. I made a mental note. Later, if I made it. I continued my rooftop journey, moving from building to building, sometimes scaling low walls, sometimes finding access doors that led to stairwells. The stairwells were always a gamble. Dark, enclosed spaces where an encounter could be fatal. But sometimes they offered the only way to the next building, to the next path forward. One stairwell led me down 2 flights, then opened onto a narrow walkway that connected to a parking garage. The garage was dark, its concrete level silent and empty. The air was thick with the smell of exhaust fumes and dust. I limped inside, my eyes scanning the rows of abandoned vehicles. This was it, my chance for a car. I moved cautiously through the garage, my walking stick tapping lightly against the concrete. My flashlight beam cut through the gloom, dancing across the chrome and glass of the parked cars.
Most were locked. Many had broken windows. Some were simply too small, too damaged. Then I saw it, a dark SUV, a Toyota 4Runner, parked near an exit ramp. It looked intact. Its windows were dark but unbroken. A potential tank in this new, brutal world, a fortress on wheels. I approached it slowly, my heart pounding. I tried the door handle. Locked, of course. I looked around. No bricks, no heavy objects nearby. I pulled out my butcher knife, its blade reflecting the faint light from the exit ramp. My hand trembled as I struck the window, aiming for a corner where the glass was weakest. The blade connected with a sharp crack. A web of cracks spread across the glass, but it didn't shatter. I hit it again, harder, and again. Nothing. This wasn't going to work. The glass was too thick, too reinforced. Frustration flared, a hot, angry burst of despair. I was so close, so agonizingly close to escape. I slammed my fist against the window, the impact jarring my already aching bones. Then, a low moan. From somewhere deeper in the garage. My blood ran cold. I wasn't alone. I froze, listening. The moaning came again, closer now, accompanied by a faint shuffling sound. It was moving towards me. I had to get inside, now. I looked around desperately. The SUV was impenetrable. The exit ramp was still visible, but it led down, into the deeper, darker levels of the garage. I didn't want to go down. I wanted out. My eyes fell on a small, rusted maintenance door, tucked away in a shadowed corner just beyond the SUV. It was old, metal, with a heavy padlock, but it was a door, a potential path. I limped towards it, my heart hammering against my ribs. The moaning was closer now, louder. I could hear multiple sets of shuffling feet. They were converging on my location. The padlock was thick, rusted, too strong for my knife, too stubborn for the walking stick. My multi-tool. I pulled it out, fumbling with the small, inadequate tools. The saw blade. It was tiny, meant for small tasks, not heavy-duty metal. I tried anyway, sawing at the shackle of the padlock. The metal grated, sparking, but it was agonizingly slow. Each stroke was a battle, a desperate race against the clock. The moaning was just around the corner now. I could hear their wet breaths, their guttural growls. They were almost here. Damn it, I whispered, tears stinging my eyes. It wasn't enough. It was never enough. My eyes darted around, searching for a last resort. My gaze fell on the SUV again. The tires, they were exposed. If I could disable them, if I could slash a tire, the noise might draw them away, buy me time. A desperate, foolish thought, but it was all I had. I raised the butcher knife, aiming for the sidewall of the tire. My hand trembled, but I forced it down, a desperate, wild strike. The blade sliced through the thick rubber with a satisfying hiss. Air rushed out, a loud, undeniable sound. The moaning stopped. For a second, a terrifying, absolute silence descended on the garage. Then, a fresh wave of guttural growls, closer, more agitated. The sound had drawn their attention, away from the door, towards the car. I had bought myself moments, precious, life-saving moments. I returned to the padlock, sawing frantically, ignoring the burning in my arms, the throbbing in my ankle. The saw blade was almost through, just a little more. The infected surged around the SUV, drawn by the sound of the deflating tire. They clawed at the windows, moaning, their bodies pressing against the metal. The commotion was deafening, a roar of hunger and frustration. Snap! The padlock shackle gave way, severed by my frantic sawing. It fell to the concrete with a small metallic clink. I yanked the door open, revealing a dark, musty corridor. A maintenance tunnel, perhaps. A chance. I shoved my backpack through, then squeezed myself through the narrow opening, my injured ankle protesting violently. I pulled the door shut behind me, fumbling for a way to secure it. There was no lock, no bolt, just a heavy metal bar leaning against the wall. I grabbed it, wedging it against the door handle, hoping it would hold. The sounds from the garage were muted now, a dull roar, but still present. They knew I was here. They would find a way in. I had to move. The corridor was dark, narrow, and smelled of damp concrete and stagnant water. My flashlight beam cut through the oppressive blackness, revealing a long, winding tunnel, pipes running along the ceiling, dripping steadily. This was an escape, an unlikely, terrifying escape from a world that had gone utterly mad. I began to limp forward, my walking stick echoing against the concrete, the butcher knife gripped tight in my hand. The air was cold, damp, heavy with the weight of the earth above. Every shadow was a potential threat, every creak of the pipes a jump scare. I was alone, utterly, completely alone in the bowels of a dead city. I was on a plane when the zombie apocalypse hit mid-flight, and now I was crawling through its guts. The thought was a strange, grim comfort. I had survived. I was still fighting. And as long as I could still move, still breathe, I would keep going. Towards the light. Towards whatever faint hope remained in this ruined world. The tunnel stretched endlessly, a claustrophobic nightmare of dripping pipes and echoing silence. My ankle throbbed with every step, a persistent reminder of my vulnerability. The painkillers were wearing off, and the pain was starting to sharpen, making each movement an agony. I focused on my breathing, on the simple rhythm of step, stick, step, trying to block out the fear, the crushing loneliness. The air grew colder, wetter. The sound of dripping water intensified, echoing like a metronome in the vast subterranean space. I was acutely aware of my isolation, the heavy earth above me, the unknown lurking in the shadows ahead and behind. Any sound could be a threat. Any change in the air could mean danger. My flashlight beam, now dimmer, revealed a faint, flickering light in the distance. Hope, or another illusion. I pushed harder, my pace quickening despite the pain, drawn by the promise of an exit, of fresh air, of a world that wasn't just concrete and despair. As I neared the light, the tunnel opened up into a larger chamber, a vast, cavernous space filled with the roar of rushing water. My flashlight beam danced across rusted pipes, concrete pillars, and a raging torrent of sewage. A storm drain, or a major wastewater treatment facility. The source of the light was a massive, grated opening in the ceiling, filtering in a faint, sickly yellow glow from the outside world. And beneath it, silhouetted against the grate, a figure. My heart leapt into my throat. I froze, pressing myself against a concrete pillar, my walking stick and knife gripped tight. My breath hitched. Survivor? Or one of them? The figure was still, unmoving, its back to me. It was too far, too shadowed to tell. I waited, my muscles tensed, my senses straining. The roar of the water filled the chamber, drowning out any other sounds. A blessing and a curse. I couldn't hear if there were more. I couldn't hear if it was moving. Then the figure shifted. It turned its head, slowly, deliberately. My flashlight beam, weak as it was, caught a glimpse of its profile. No, not a survivor, not a human. The skin was gray, the jaw slack, the movements jerky. It was one of them, and it was looking directly at the grated opening, drawn by the light. My stomach clenched. I was trapped between an infected and a massive roaring torrent of water. No escape. I backed away slowly, silently, trying to find another path, another way out. But the chamber was a dead end, except for the raging water. The grunts of the infected from the garage still echoed faintly behind me, a chilling reminder that retreat was not an option. I was cornered. Again. I considered my options, my mind racing. Fight? With a broken ankle, in this echo chamber, against an unknown number of infected? Foolish. Try to sneak past? Risky, but perhaps possible if I could distract it. My eyes fell on a pile of loose rocks near the edge of the water. crude but effective. I grabbed a fist-sized stone, its rough texture cold against my palm.
I aimed, took a deep breath, and threw it with all my might, aiming for the far side of the chamber, away from the infected. The rock skipped across the concrete with a loud clatter, echoing in the vast space, then splashed into the rushing water with a final plunk. The infected figure's head snapped towards the sound. It turned, its dead eyes sweeping the empty chamber, drawn by the noise. It began to shuffle towards the sound, moving away from the grated opening. This was my chance. I limped forward, as fast as my injured ankle would allow, towards the grated exit. The roar of the water was deafening thou, drowning out the sound of my steps, drowning out the moans of the infected. I reached the grate, pulling myself up, my fingers finding purchase on the cold, rusted metal. It was heavy, sealed tight. My heart sank. Another dead end. I looked back. The infected figure was still shuffling, searching for the source of the noise, its back to me. But it wouldn't last. It would eventually turn, or another would come. I looked at the grate again, running my hands over the rusted metal. It was bolted from the inside, thick, industrial-strength bolts. My multi-tool was useless, my hammer was useless, my knife was useless. Despair threatened to overwhelm me. Was this it? Was this where my journey ended? Trapped in a sewer, with a broken ankle, surrounded by death. Then I saw it. A weak point. One of the bolts, rusted almost through, was barely holding on. It was loose, corroded. My eyes gleamed with a desperate hope. I pulled out my butcher knife, its sharp point glinting in the dim light. I jammed the tip into the gap around the rusted bolt, twisting, prying, forcing the corroded metal to give way. It was slow, agonizing work. Each twist sent a fresh wave of pain through my wrist, through my shoulder. Snap! The bolt gave way, falling to the concrete with a soft clink, almost inaudible beneath the roar of the water. 1 down, 3 to go. I worked frantically, ignoring the burning in my arms, the pain in my ankle, the growing sounds of the infected behind me. The sounds were closer now, the shuffling more distinct. The first infected had given up its search and was turning back, its head slowly swiveling towards me. I forced myself to focus, twist, pry, push. The second bolt groaned, then gave way. 2 down. The infected was now facing me, its dead eyes fixed on my struggling form. It let out a low, guttural growl, then began to shuffle towards me, slowly, relentlessly. The third bolt. It was tougher, more resistant. I gritted my teeth, pushing, pulling, twisting the knife blade with all my might. The metal groaned, screeched, but held. The infected was closer now, just 20 feet away. Its moans were louder, more agitated. I could see the torn clothes, the gray skin, the hungry, dead eyes. Snap! The third bolt gave way, ripping from the frame with a final protesting shriek. 1 more, just 1 more. My arms were shaking, my vision blurred with sweat and tears. The infected was 15 feet away. I could feel its presence, its hunger, a cold, suffocating weight. I jammed the knife into the last bolt, twisted, pushed, screamed with frustration and desperation. The metal screeched, then, with a final, agonizing groan, it gave way. The last bolt clattered to the floor. The grate was free. I pushed at it with my shoulder, straining, grunting with effort. It was heavy, cumbersome, but it swung inward, revealing a narrow opening. Above, the sickly yellow light of the dying world. Below, freedom. The infected was 5 feet away. Its dead hands reached, its jaws opened wide. I shoved myself through the opening, my body scraping against the rough concrete, my ankle sending a fresh wave of agony through me. I tumbled out, landing hard on my hands and knees on the damp earth, gasping for breath. I was outside, in a drainage ditch, surrounded by tall, reedy grass. The sun was higher now,
its sickly yellow light cutting through the smoke-filled sky. The air was cool, fresh, cleaner than the foul air of the tunnel. Behind me, I could hear the snarling of the infected, frustrated, trapped in the drain. They couldn't follow. The opening was too small for them to climb out. I pushed myself up, my body screaming in protest. My ankle throbbed, a relentless, agonizing rhythm. But I was free. I had escaped the tunnel. I had escaped the garage. I had escaped the plane. I was on a plane when the zombie apocalypse hit mid-flight, and now I was out. I looked around. The ditch ran alongside a long, deserted road, and in the distance, spanning across the ruined landscape, was the interstate, my salvation, my path out of this dead city. It was still miles away, but it was there, a beacon of hope in a world plunged into darkness. I started to limp, one painful step at a time, my walking stick tapping against the damp earth. The butcher knife was still clutched in my hand, a cold, hard reminder of the fight ahead. The roar of the water from the drain faded behind me, replaced by the distant moaning of the city. I was alone, broken, but alive. And as long as I was alive, I would keep fighting. Towards the interstate, towards whatever future awaited me in this brutal, terrifying new world. My journey, it seemed, had only just begun. The road stretched ahead, cracked and abandoned, littered with the husks of cars. The sun, a hazy yellow disk, beat down through the smoke-filled sky, turning the air into a suffocating blanket. I was alone, broken, but alive. And as long as I was alive, I would keep fighting. Towards the interstate, towards whatever future awaited me in this brutal, terrifying new world. My journey, it seemed, had only just begun. The road stretched ahead, cracked and abandoned, littered with the husks of cars. The sun, a hazy yellow disk, beat down through the smoke-filled sky, turning the air into a suffocating blanket. My ankle screamed with every step, the pain a constant, grinding agony that gnawed at my resolve. I had to stop. I dragged myself to the side of the road, collapsing beneath the sparse shade of a dying tree. My body was shaking, my muscles burning, and my throat was raw with thirst. I pulled out one of the water bottles from my backpack, drinking slowly, savoring each cool gulp. It was a lifeline, a moment of precious reprieve in this relentless nightmare. As I rested, I assessed my situation. My ankle was throbbing, clearly worse than a sprain, likely fractured. My makeshift splint was doing little more than offering symbolic support. I was low on food, low on water, and running on fumes. The nearest major highway, the interstate, was still a good hour's painful limp away. And the city stretched behind me, a vast, moaning monument to humanity's failure. I closed my eyes, trying to conjure images of my sister, of her bright, infectious laugh, of my nephew's curious eyes. Were they safe? Had they survived? The thought was a double-edged sword, a powerful motivation to keep going, and a crushing weight of anxiety that threatened to drown me. I was on a plane when the zombie apocalypse hit mid-flight, and they were on the ground, just as oblivious, just as vulnerable. A distant wail of sirens cut through the silence. Not the familiar emergency wail, but a distorted, broken sound, like a dying animal. It was followed by a faint, rhythmic thump, thump, thump. A helicopter? Hope flared, bright and painful, then quickly died. Military? Rescue? Or just another casualty, another desperate last stand in the sky? The thump, thump, thump grew louder, closer. I pushed myself up, wincing, leaning on my walking stick. My eyes scanned the sky, searching. And then I saw it. A military helicopter, a Black Hawk, streaking across the hazy sky, low and fast. It was an unmistakable symbol of the old world, a potent image of power and order. But it wasn't a rescue. It was leaving. Heading north, away from the burning city, away from the death. A wave of despair washed over me, cold and sharp. They weren't coming for us. They were abandoning us, abandoning the city, abandoning the dead. The helicopter disappeared into the smoke-filled horizon, leaving only the memory of its desperate flight. The silence settled again, heavier, more profound than before. My fragile hope shattered. There would be no rescue, no safe zones, just survival. Raw, brutal, solitary survival. I took a deep breath, the acrid taste of smoke filling my lungs. No matter, I would survive on my own. I had to. I pushed myself up, ignoring the fresh wave of pain in my ankle, and began to limp forward again, towards the interstate. The sun continued its slow, painful descent. The sky turned a bruised purple, streaked with angry orange and red from the distant fires. The shadows lengthened, twisting into grotesque shapes, turning every bush, every discarded tire into a potential threat. The moaning from the city grew louder again, a chilling chorus that seemed to rise with the twilight. I reached the highway overpass just as darkness fell completely. The interstate below was a graveyard of cars, twisted metal, and silent, abandoned vehicles. No lights, no movement, just the eerie, oppressive stillness of a world without people. And, of course, the shuffling figures of the infected, moving aimlessly among the wreckage, drawn by some unseen force. I stood on the overpass, a lone figure silhouetted against the dying embers of the city, and looked down at the highway. My path, my only path. It was a terrifying gauntlet, but it was also my only hope. I had to find a car, a working car, something to get me out of here. And I had to do it before the night truly settled, before the infected became even more active, more dangerous. I descended the on-ramp, each step a carefully calculated agony. The road was littered with shattered glass, debris, and the grotesque remains of what had been a vibrant, bustling highway. My flashlight beam danced across abandoned cars, their doors ajar, their interiors ransacked. I started checking vehicles, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. Most were locked. Many had dead batteries. Some were simply too damaged. My hands were scraped and dirty, my clothes torn, my body aching. But I pushed on, relentlessly, methodically. I found a Honda Civic, its front bumper crumpled, but otherwise seemingly intact. I tried the door handle, locked. I tried the window, also locked. Frustration, sharp and bitter, flared again. I had to get inside. I looked around. A discarded jack lay nearby. Heavy, industrial, a weapon, and a tool. I grabbed it, its cold metal reassuring in my hand. I swung it, once, twice, against the Civic's driver's side window. The reinforced glass spiderwebbed, but didn't shatter. I swung again, with all the desperation of a cornered animal. This time, with a sharp crack, the glass gave way, raining down in a shower of tiny, glittering shards. I reached in, fumbled with the door handle, and pulled it open. The interior smelled of old coffee and fear. I slid inside, my injured ankle protesting violently. I was in. I immediately checked the ignition. No keys, of course. Why would there be? I cursed under my breath. I needed a way to hotwire it, but I had no experience, no knowledge. I searched the glove compartment. Nothing. Under the seats. Nothing. In the visors. Nothing. Despair threatened to engulf me. This was it. Then, a glint of metal. A spare key, hidden in a small magnetic box, tucked high up under the dashboard. A miracle. A small, shining beacon of hope in the overwhelming darkness. My fingers trembled as I pulled it free, the metal cold and smooth against my skin. I jammed the key into the ignition, my hand shaking. I turned it. The engine sputtered, groaned, coughed. Then, with a glorious roar, it came to life. The headlights flicker on, cutting bright, defiant beams through the darkness. The radio blared static, a harsh, grating sound. My heart leaped. I had a car. I had a way out. But the roar of the engine, the sudden blast of light, had drawn attention. From the rearview mirror, I could see them. Shadows shuffling out of the darkness, their moans growing louder, closer. They were coming. I slammed the car into drive, my foot heavy on the accelerator. The Civic lurched forward, tires squealing against the asphalt. I swerved around an abandoned truck, then another. The infected were closing in, their gray faces illuminated in my headlights, their dead eyes fixed on me. I drove, fast and reckless, weaving through the abandoned cars, my eyes darting between the road ahead and the rearview mirror. The moaning faded behind me, replaced by the roar of the engine, the frantic beat of my own heart. I was on the interstate, heading north, away from the city, away from the death, away from the nightmare that had begun mid-flight and now consumed the world. The city lights, the fires, slowly receded behind me, fading into a dull orange glow on the horizon. The landscape outside my window was dark, desolate, unfamiliar. Fields, trees, the black silhouettes of distant hills. I was alone, but I was moving. I was free, for now. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white, my body aching, my mind reeling. I was on a plane when the zombie apocalypse hit mid-flight, and now I was driving through its aftermath, a lone survivor in a ghost world. The world was broken, but I was not. I was still fighting, and I would keep fighting until I found my family, until I found a safe place, until I found something, anything that resembled hope in this new, terrifying reality. The road ahead was long, dangerous, and uncertain. But it was a road, and I was on it. The true test of survival had just begun.